Goodness knows, I am not the biggest fan of the New York Times, but I am a huge fan of one of their journalists, Jamel Bouie. And 2 days ago, he had a really good piece entitled The MAGA Movement's Empty Vision of the Future. And thank you, Jamel, for sharing that article with your followers on Blue Sky. I want to read a little bit of it and talk a little bit about it. Jamel starts off by saying, it's fitting that a political movement whose slogan is the backward-looking Make America Great Again, and whose tribune, Donald Trump, appears to live in an eternal 1990 of his own mind, is waging war on the American future. I said yesterday that it's not Make America Great Again. What Trump and the Republicans want to do is regress America. They want to take us backward in time. They want to undo scientific progress. They want to undo financial security. They want to wreck so many of the good things that we care about and take us back to a time in the past when things were actively worse for every working class person. There is nothing about MAGA that is making America great again. They are actively regressing our society. Jamel then goes on to talk about how Trump is waging war against America's future in 4 theaters of conflict. The first is what Jamel calls a full-spectrum attack on the idea of the United States as a nation of laws and not men. That Trump doesn't want to be constrained by the law, he wants his opinion to be law. I love how Jamel describes that. He says, Trump wants to be unbound by anything other than his singular will. In this first theater of conflict, Trump is trying to turn America from a democratic republic into a personalist autocracy. The second theater of conflict that he describes is the economy. And I think it should be pretty clear to everybody by now that Trump has tried to alienate us from our trading partners. He's trying to isolate us from the global economy through his ridiculous tariffs. And it's not just manufactured goods coming into our country. He doesn't want immigrants to come into this country, no matter what kind of skills and education and contribution they could make to America. He wants to isolate us. Jamel says Trump wants to create a garrison state with the power to dictate the terms of the global order. The thing is that by doing all of that, isolating us to that degree, we're not going to have the power to dictate anything in terms of the global order. He's actively weakening our position on the world stage while wrecking our economy here at home at the same time. Jamel makes a really good point here. Trump keeps talking about how we need to bring manufacturing and heavy industry back to the U.S. No longer import things, we need Americans to manufacture those things at home. The thing is, nobody wants to do those jobs. But the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, says this is the new model, where you work in these kinds of plants for the rest of your life, and your kids work there and your grandkids work there. I don't know about you, but I don't have a vision for myself and my children and my grandchildren that they are cogs in the industrial machine. And as Jamel says, the reality is that this particular campaign by the Trump regime is an effort to de-skill the working population of the U.S. It's more likely to make our country and its residents impoverished than it is to bring on some kind of golden age. The third theater where Trump is attacking us is around the climate. This line really stuck out at me. In the same way that Trump and his allies have rejected the obligation to pass the nation's tradition of self-governance on to the next generation by taking away our democracy and instituting autocracy, they have also rejected the obligation to pass a living planet on to those who will inherit the earth. As a permaculture person who believes in earth care, people care, and fair share, and I take very seriously our obligation when it comes to people care for future generations, earth care for the future of the planet, and fair share as it refers to the fact that we are just borrowing this planet from future generations. The earth does not belong to us now in this moment. We are stewards of a shared heritage of our children's inheritance. But Trump and MAGA, they don't view it that way. They don't see themselves as stewards of the planet, stewards of our shared public land, stewards of America's resources at all. They have, unsurprisingly as capitalists, they have an extractive view of their relationship to the earth. They don't feel a responsibility to people who have yet to be born. They don't even feel a responsibility to the people who live here now. It's all, how much can I get out of this, right? Jamel calls it an agenda of unlimited resource extraction, with little regard for the consequences. I've been railing against the Trump regime's attempts to sell off our shared federal land that belongs to the American people. Federal land does not belong to the government. It belongs to you and me. It is our shared heritage. And Trump is trying to sell it off to developers for things like logging, building luxury housing, building vacation destinations, and for mining. Mining for various kinds of minerals. They want to mine lithium in Southern Oregon. And let's not forget drilling for oil in areas that were formerly protected. Trump wants to log our national forests, destroy ecosystems. And as Jamel pointed out, he is openly hostile to renewable energy, despite its growing efficiency and declining costs. Keep in mind that big oil has funded Donald Trump to the tune of $1 billion, and Trump has promised to expand drilling. And I've talked about this before, but Trump and J.D. Vance and the greedy corporations that back them, they want to do far more than just log and develop land that is owned by the American people. They want to do far more than make a profit extracting resources from the American people and our land. The Trump regime has also rolled back a bunch of important environmental policy that was meant to protect habitats and people from corporate polluters. But as Jamel pointed out, they've also fired a ton of federal workers whose jobs it is to do things like monitor water quality and protect endangered species. The fourth theater where MAGA and Trump are waging war on America's future, according to Jamel, is the assault on the nation's capacity to produce scientific, technological, and medical breakthroughs. This is exactly what I talked about yesterday. They've already set scientific research back decades by cutting off funding. Medical, agricultural, and other scientific research has just been all chucked out the window. Jamel says the White House has also taken a buzzsaw to billions of dollars in federal grants for research in medicine and the hard sciences. In the first 3 months of the year, according to a minority report of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, the Trump administration cut $2.7 billion from the National Institutes of Health, including, as I've pointed out many times, slashing funding for cancer research. He goes on to list other ways that the Trump regime is actively cutting funding and trying to destroy science in the U.S., slashing the National Science Foundation by $4.7 billion, gutting the Department of Energy's research wing. A number of those grants that farmers were supposed to get that Trump is withholding from them, even though the money was already promised to them by Congress, those are all through the Department of Energy. They're also trying to defund or eliminate global disease monitoring and health tracking systems through the CDC. It's more than that. We're also seeing the brain drain of our scientists who have lost access to their funding, fleeing to go work elsewhere where they can get funding, where there is not an active war on science. This is the wanton, pointless destruction of a MAGA cultural revolution. It serves no obvious purpose other than to shrink the government in the most arbitrary and capricious way imaginable. How does one make America great again by destroying its capacity to develop advanced technology? Who prospers when we rob our scientists of the resources necessary to make breakthroughs that could transform our society for the better? Jamel goes on to ask, why is MAGA doing this? Who does this benefit? Again, please go read Jamel's full article because he talks about what is Trump's motivation for this? Is there a plan at all? Is it like Naomi Klein said, and it's end times fascism? Or is it, as John Gans said, Trump and his allies are fighting a war on the future, and in particular on the idea that our technological progress should proceed hand in hand with social and ethical progress? Are they fighting a war for the future insofar as this means the narrowing of our moral horizons for the sake of unleashing certain energies tied to hierarchy, race, gender, and sexuality? MAGA wants a future in the United States that abandons its Enlightenment heritage and liberal aspirations in favor of a closed society and rooted in notions of dominance and zero-sum competition. I agree with Jamel here. I found John Gantz's take on all of this as good as any. But please listen to this next part. We have in this country a powerful movement eager to summon an authoritarian future. What we need is a movement dedicated to an egalitarian one. A movement dedicated to a future in which all Americans can live the lives they choose to make for themselves. A country that rejects walls and rigid hierarchies in favor of the democratic virtues and universalist ideals of this country's best traditions. Frederick Douglass spoke of a composite nation. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of a beloved community. With these materials, we can imagine a better future and contest the dark dreams of those in power. And if our political leaders are too timid to embark on the task, too afraid of backlash to think beyond the familiar, then we, as citizens still and not yet subjects, have an obligation to do so. Precisely, Jamel, precisely. We get to write our future as the American people. We cannot let Trump write our future, this grim, dark, oppressive future that he wants. We get to dream of what America looks like. We get to communicate that compelling vision. And we've got to be willing to commit to do the work that is required to bring it about.